What is time? Does it exist independently of our minds, or is it a subjective construct? Is time linear, circular, or branching? And how do we use photography to capture moments frozen in time? All this and more in this episode of Philosopher, Photographer. Today, we're going to be exploring the philosophy of time through long exposure photography. Time is one of the most fundamental and mysterious aspects of our existence. We measure it, we experience it, we remember it, we anticipate it, but we can never fully grasp it. Time is also one of the most fascinating and challenging topics in philosophy, as philosophers have debated its nature, origin, direction, and meaning for centuries. What is time? Does it exist independently of our minds, or is it a subjective construct? Is time linear, circular, or branching? Does time have a beginning and an end, or is it eternal and infinite? Is time the same for everyone, or does it vary depending on the observer and the situation? How does time affect our identity, our morality, and our destiny? These are some of the questions that we will try to answer in this episode with the help of some famous philosophers and their quotes on time. We will also see how we can use some of the photography tips on long exposure photography to create stunning images that capture the essence of time. Let's start with one of the most influential and original philosophers of the 20th century, Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein was an Austrian-British philosopher who worked on the philosophy of language, logic, and mind. He's known for his two major works, the Tractus Logico-Philosophicus and the Philosophical Investigations. He is also known for his aphorisms and his style of writing. Wittgenstein said, "Philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language." He also said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Wittgenstein's quotes teach us that language is not a transparent and neutral medium, but a complex and powerful system that shapes our thoughts and reality. He teaches us that language can also be misleading, confusing, and deceptive, and that we need to be careful and critical of how we use and understand words. He also teaches us that language can also be creative, expressive, and poetic, and that we can expand our world by exploring the possibilities of language. So how can we use Wittgenstein's philosophy in our long exposure photography? Well, one way is to use language as a tool to create images that show the bewitchment, the limits, and the possibilities of our world. We can also use language as a tool to create images that challenge, confuse, and delight the viewers, and make them question and appreciate the meaning of words. For example, we can use words as elements of our compositions or use images to illustrate words. We can also combine words and images to create a hybrid form of expression. We can also use words and images to create a paradox, a contradiction, or a pun using time as a factor. Imagine some examples of long exposure photography that use language in a Wittgensteinian way. Think of a photo of a clock with the word time written on it, with the camera showing the motion blur of the clock hands. This photo can represent the idea that language is a bewitchment of our world and that words can be misleading and deceptive. Or another photo of a sign that says stop or go, with the camera showing the light trails of the cars passing by. This photo can represent the idea that language is a limit of our world, and that words can be restrictive and confining. How about a photo of a person holding a sign that says, "This is not a sign," with the camera showing the blur of the person's movement? This photo can represent the idea that language is a challenge to our world, and that words can be paradoxical and contradictory. Now let's move on to another philosopher who had a different view of time, Bergson. Bergson was a French philosopher and Nobel laureate who worked on the philosophy of intuition, duration, and memory. He's known for his books Time and Free Will, Matter and Memory, and Creative Evolution. He's also known for his influence on modern art, literature, and psychology. Bergson said, "The pure present is an ungraspable advance of the past devouring the future. In truth, all sensation is already memory." He also said, "To exist is to change is to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly." He teaches us that time is not a succession of discrete instants, but a continuous and indivisible flow. He also teaches us that time is not a uniform and objective reality, but a subjective and personal experience. He also teaches us that time is the source of our creativity, freedom, and evolution, and that we are constantly changing and creating ourselves through time. So how can we use Bergson's philosophy in our long exposure photography? Well, one way is to use time as a tool to create images that show the dynamism, the continuity, and the subjectivity of our experience. We can also use time as a tool to create images that show our creativity, freedom, and evolution as photographers. For example, we can use long exposure to capture the movement, the change, and the emotion of our subjects, such as people, animals, or even nature. We can use long exposure to create abstract, artistic, or surreal images that reflect our vision, our style, or our mood. Consider some of the examples of long exposure photos that use time in a Bergsonian way. Imagine a photo of a person walking, running, or dancing, with the camera showing the blur of their body, limbs, or clothes. This photo can represent the idea that time is a dynamic process and that our experience is a movement and a change. Or how about a photo of a waterfall, a river, or the sea, with the camera showing the smooth and soft texture of the water? This photo can represent the idea that time is a continuous flow and that our experience is a duration and a unity. How about a photo of a sunset, a sunrise, or a starry night, with the camera showing the color and the light variations of the sky? This photo can represent the idea that time is a subjective experience and that our experience is a memory and an emotion. Finally, how about a photo of a light painting, a light trail, or a star trail, with the camera showing the shapes, patterns, and the effects of the light? This photo can represent the idea that time is a source of creativity and that our experience is a vision and a style. These are just some examples of how we can use time to create Bergson-inspired long exposure photos. Of course, there are many other ways to interpret and apply his philosophy, and I encourage you to experiment and find your own. We have reached the end of this episode of Philosopher, Photographer. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I also hope you feel inspired to use time and long exposure in your photography and to explore the philosophy of time through your images. Remember, time is not a fixed and objective entity, but a dynamic and a subjective process. Time is not a simple and measurable quantity, but a complex, dynamic, and qualitative process. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.